Deconverted Man here. Christians have an amazing ability. They really do. The ability to try to rationalize away the irrational system of their own belief. I was in a brief conversation with a couple Christians, thanks to S.J. Thompson. And so if you haven't watched that, a link is in the description. And I put when I join in at, the time set was like about an hour into it that I joined it. So there's this gentleman who is taking quite some time to pontificate on the woes that he's had. The personal stories are never just short and to the point. They always take forever to get the point across, right? So he has, or had PTSD and had other, he was blind in an eye or at least hard of seeing in an eye or what have you. And he suffered with this for 20 years. And then God decided that he would be cured of all of it immediately and instantly. Although, well, it wasn't instant, though, because, it took 20 years. And in the conversation, I'm asking him, the hard questions that should be asked instead of the softball questions that SJ asked, and also, she let him get away with not really answering the questions, whereas I won't. So he says that that it took so long because of him, really. It was his fault that it took so long because he didn't have the proper belief. Because remember now, within Christianity, as well as most faith systems, it isn't about facts. It is about belief. What you believe is what matters, not what you know, not what you can verify, not what is true or real, but what you believe is the only thing that really matters. So he had this belief about that he would always be this way. Now, where he got that from, he says, that's what they said, I don't know, maybe some authority said that somewhere, or maybe he read it, or maybe he inferred it, or maybe he just came up with it. Who knows? And then at some point, now he mentions this book that he read that talked about the brain being plastic and how you can, decide, you can change your mind. So it's not true that you're always stuck this way. And that's correct. You're not always going to be stuck, hi Gary, in a mode depending on your brain. And so you might be able to literally change your mind and say, well, I'm not going to be this way, and I'm not going to let this occur. And it might work, but it's going to take time, of course. Who knows how long it was between when he read that book and when he had this recovery. But none of that's God. That's all him doing that. But from his perspective, it's that God kept him ill or let him be ill for these 20 years because he was believing the wrong thing. Did God tell him the right thing to believe? No, he just worked on him for 20 years, chipping away at him, whatever that means, until he finally found out that, no, I don't have to stay this way. I can be a different way. And so now I have the choice that I didn't have before to say, well, I'll stay this way, or I will, I will choose not to be this way. But he didn't know that choice existed during these 20 years, and God never bothered to tell him until later because reasons. And this makes sense to him. This is coherent to him. This absolutely makes sense, that it's his fault that God didn't give him the cure for 20 years because he believed the wrong thing. Now, was he told the right thing to believe? No. Was he made aware of it? How, so no. It's just, some book that he finally got helped him out. And that's great. It's uncommon, very uncommon, I would think, for anybody to recover But again, we only know some of the story. We don't know the whole story. Oh, sorry. Pardon me. Still this stupid sick thing, whatever I've had the past few days is killing me here. Well, hopefully not killing me. It's making me a better person, yeah. Anyways, so the rationalization of these irrational beliefs is amazing. Now, anyone can do this. Humans do this all the time. But it's just so obvious to me in the Christian. And we got off that whole topic of the miracle recovery because and it's interesting. SJ asked him, "How do you know it was God?" And I asked him that as well, and he had no answer for that. No answer at all because there isn't one. How do you know that it was God that fixed this in the end, and not just yourself or the book or your maybe in a sense your beliefs did change this because you had believed that you were stuck this way, and then you begin to believe that you weren't stuck this way, and maybe that helped you to get out of it. But none of that is God. He didn't have an answer for that. We move on in that conversation to um, this analogy that didn't really work about that God is the doctor and he's giving you the medicine and either you take the medicine or you don't. I said, yeah, no, but it's not that because the consequences either you take the medicine or the doctor shoots you. And I didn't go far enough with the analogy because actually the analogy would be the doctor has created the sickness that you have, offers the cure to it, and says if you don't take the cure, not only will they make sure you stay sick, but they'll make you even sicker forever and all time. That's the and there's 100 other doctors that everyone else claims also cures this illness, and nobody can tell for sure which doctor actually cures the illness. Oh, and all the doctors are also invisible, and nobody has ever seen them. That would make the analogy better. But nonetheless, the rationalization that no, it's okay that God set up the entire system to be one where God can't be around evil, so then it makes evil or allows evil. Why would you do that, God? That's kind of stupid. Just make a universe or a reality that cannot have evil. Well, then the question was probably, well, how would you know what bad was if you had no? Who cares? What would it matter if you knew nothing but pleasure? You wouldn't ever miss not knowing pleasure. I don't think it wouldn't matter that you didn't know what it was to not have pleasure. It's just not relevant. Why do you need to know that? And isn't it God? Couldn't God just tell you what that was like? If God can do anything, but no, of course not. And this is the other Christian that had chimed in by this time, and already I've become extraordinarily jaded and irritated at the lack of time that I was given versus the lack of time the time that the theist was given. Anyway, so this other guy chimes in with you're not being civil, and yeah, it's like whatever. I'm not having it. I've heard this before. It's old. It's the same thing, and I'm just kind of done at this point. But at any rate, and that well, maybe God couldn't help but make maybe God had to make this the system the way it is. That this is the only way to make such a system. It's so God isn't all powerful in the end. Why or here's an idea. Don't bother making a system at all then if the only system you can make is one that's going to have all these flaws in it. It's just completely incoherent. But the amazing power of the Christian to try to make excuses for all of these problems. They can't see the truth of the matter that their God set up the problem, then set up the solution for the problem, and then demands that you take the solution or else. That's an ad ballum, period. There's no way around that. And then there's also an appeal to a bribe where if you do take the thing, then you get to go to the good place. Well, like I said, it's not just Christians that do this. Anyone can do this. Anyone has this power, if you will, this ability to rationalize. It can be good or it can be bad. How you use it will determine its usefulness. And that's why, and it's interesting if you listen to the conversation at all, you'll hear the word belief many times given by them. It's interesting, even when talking about the analogy with the doctor, that you have to have faith that the pill will help you. I said, no, 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 you don't. You can know. We're talking about a real situation where if you're talking about a medicine, then we actually have things that were conducted to test the medicine. We know how effective it is. We know what the percentile is based on a bell curve. We know a lot of things about it that we don't know when it comes to the effectiveness of the treatment that God is offering. And I concluded that, this God's incoherent, it's illogical, and it's an evil tyrant. It's just a monster. And they can't see it. I was there once. I guess that's what's so frustrating to me in a way, is that I was also trapped in that, where I thought that it made sense. Then I began to see how unfair it truly was. It's also interesting, if you listen to that conversation, you'll hear how really negative, Yahweh, how really negative the Christian, this particular Christian at any rate, viewed all other faiths. Well, the Muslims, they don't have a relationship with God, so they're not saved. The Jehovah's Witnesses, no, that doesn't really count. It's like, it's amazing, and it's doubly so because the other person had asked him, what do we do with all these other belief systems out there? And he said it didn't really matter what you believed as long as you had the core belief of Jesus. But then it unravels to reveal that yes, it actually does matter. You can't believe in universalism. You can't believe in this. You can't believe in that. And all these, you can't be these other religions because they don't count. They're not good enough. And it's just amazing how it, in the end, it is. If you're not doing the things that you're supposed to do, then you're screwed. But that's every religion tells you the same thing. If you don't do it this way, you're screwed. That's why it's about belief and not evidence. That's why it's about, well, you have to have the faith to take that medication. No, I don't have to have any faith at all in the medication. Because if we're talking about reality, then we have tests that have been done on the medication. Well, you have to have faith that the doctor has the right amount of expertise. No, I don't. The doctor wouldn't be hired unless they had the qualifications to be a doctor. Well, you have to have then faith in the system that it played out this role. Well, but the system's been shown to work, and if it doesn't work, you get to sue the system. But even there, it's not a perfect system, but we're not perfect beings. And God is said to be a perfect being that can't come up with this coherent system. And I said, the good news is it's not made by God, it's made by humans. That's why it doesn't really make any sense. That's why it's so incoherent. That's why there's so many logical fallacies in it. That's why the God of the Christian, Yahweh, does not exist. Now, I'm happy to say that. Other gods, I don't know. Depends what you got. But Yahweh, no, doesn't exist. How do I know? Because a God that offers logical nonsense isn't any God at all. And that's what it does. It says, here's this ad Ballium. If you don't do this thing, you're screwed. And oh, by the way, here's this bribe. If you do it, then you're fine. See, because you did this thing that I hate. I can't be around you. And so now you have to believe this certain thing. And if you believe that, then you're fine. because it has to be a blood sacrifice. That's also interesting. Why does God need blood? Why? Why does that matter? Didn't God also make blood? What is so special about the hemoglobins? What's so special about blood? That you need that. What amount of quantity of blood is required? And why? It's just incoherent. What does the sacrifice matter to God? In fact, is it really a sacrifice? I mean, you're talking about a being that is existence all eternity. So time for it is kind of meaningless in a sense. If I was to take this cute little guy and shred him up, which I wouldn't do. I wouldn't do that. I promise. Oh, sorry. But if I was, I've sacrificed it, but I've only sacrificed it from my perspective, not from a perspective of a being that is always existent, because it can always go back and see it again and interact with it again. And besides that, it could just make it again anyways. Animals are not said to have souls or spirits by some Christians. And so, okay, I kill it, and that's a sacrifice. Why? If I wait for it to die, what's the difference for the God? For me, yeah, there's a difference because I'm killing it now rather than later. And in fact, not only am I killing it, but instead of eating it, I'm burning all of it for the God's pleasure. So I'm making it completely unusable by me. So it's a sacrifice from my perspective, but it can't possibly be a sacrifice from the creator's perspective, because it can just make a new one. It just pop a new one into being. So how is it a sacrifice at all? Why does it matter at all? And even if, when of course you get to the Jesus sacrifice, then you get completely incoherence, because not only is it not a sacrifice, because God can't really die, but it's a self-sacrifice. It's like, here, I'm giving you a piece of myself, that's also my son, but and also is going to sacrifice himself by letting you guys sacrifice him, in order so I can have this blood that I require to forgive you happen. And then you have to believe that that actually applies to you for it to count. What? Why? Why can't it just count? It's nonsense. And so that's really, it's just amazing. Anyways, so that's what I've started the year with, I suppose, is dealing with more nonsense. And I've got another video to analyze for logical fallacies. So I guess we're never going to be able to get any sort of sensical sense from any of this, or maybe we will. I don't know. At any rate, so those are my thoughts and the video, the rather long conversation. I did tweet it out, but I'll link it in the in the thing, and you can check it out, or if you want, and you can complain at me if you want, or ask me questions or whatever. That'd be great. Anyways, so bye. All right, time to fin. Bye, Gary and Mullis forever. I'll see you all next time. Okay, did I push the button now? Can I talk about anything? No, I didn't. Oh no.